So you should be looking at something like this now. You've UV'd your model in Maya, you've imported those as OBJ files into ZBrush. You've then taken some time to sculpt in some basic detail here. Now there were a couple of things that I wanted to point out previously that I missed, and I was going to mention them now, but they also apply to sculpting as well. Now obviously we're working on a model that's not symmetrical. So the arms look pretty much the same, but obviously if we turn on symmetry, if we just press X, as you can see here, as I'm sculpting on the hand here, over at the other side here, it's sculpting thin air. And that's because the object, like I say, is asymmetrical. Now what you can do is, if we go down to our transform menu, we can enable use Poseable symmetry. So if I just turn that on and let it calculate, again this is just something that I forgot to mention previously, so I just thought I'd add it in now because it does apply to when you're painting the texture as well. We just wait for that to calculate. In fact, I'll just pause the video while it's working. It's probably because it's on such a higher resolution model. Obviously you'd apply this on your lower resolution mesh and then, you know, it wouldn't take as long to calculate. So that's finished calculating now. And as you can see, as I'm sculpting on this side, it's matching on the opposite side. I move down to the fingers, you can see it's now completely matched and working as it should. And the same goes down to the legs. So if you're working on one side of him, if you have that active, if I just go back down, use Poseable symmetry, calculate it early on in your project, so when you're just working on your base mesh, sculpting in the larger details, and it won't take as long to calculate. But now we can happily go in after it's finished auto saving. Just wait for this. But there you could see as I was moving it around, even though the model's asymmetrical, I mean obviously the face is completely different on one side to the other, so it wouldn't work as well in those sorts of instances. But in this case where the topology on the arm, there we go, the topology on the arm is, come on ZBrush, what are you doing? There we go. Right, the topology on the arms is the same, so it's calculated that symmetry there and on the legs, so now we can just start to go in and work on one side and not worry about the other. That's if you want them both to be the same. But anyway, now we've got that done, let's start to look at the actual texture. So at the moment we're working on this matte cap red wax material here. We ideally don't want to work on that because if we're painting the colours onto this, we're going to see that material underneath. So the material is sort of like the paper that you're going to be painting onto. Obviously if you work with a different sort of paper, you're going to get a different result when you paint on top of it. So we're just going to start defining, we're just going to begin by defining our base material and also our base colour. Now up here you will normally have Z add activated, and that's going to actually edit the surface of the model. If we're working just on the textures, we just want RGB highlighted, and that just means we're just going to be painting colour information onto the surface. We could also have our material channel highlighted, and then we're just going to be painting this material. Just to speed things up a little bit, I'm just going to switch this to mRGB, and what that will do is that will apply the chosen colour and the chosen material to our specified subtool up here. So let's just get in and start working, enough talking. So a good base material to work with, we basically want something white, so we could use anything really. skin shade 3 perhaps. No, that's not going to work. So maybe something a bit flatter like skin shade 4. That should be fine. And you'll notice the colour, because we've changed the material, it's updated it on everything. Until we bake it into that particular subtool, it will all change. So that'll do for our base material for our skin. So let's just change the colour. Maybe we'll have sort of a deep red to sort of work on. And that's just going to simulate those very deep, the deepest parts of the tissue. And as we paint on top of this, we'll still get elements of this red poking through, and it'll just give us a bit more variation. So again, that's applied it to the that's applied it to everything. But the problem is, if we change this colour, it's going to change it as well. So we need to bake that into that model. So because we've got our mRGB highlighted, our RGB intensity is 100. We're just going to go to Colour, Fill Object. Now nothing appears to have changed. So let's just go to our brain object. And let's make this a different material. So let's set this as maybe a blin. As you can see, it's applied it to everything other than the body, because the body material and colour was baked in. So let's change the colour of the brain to pink. Just to start us off. Colour, Fill Object. And then we move on to the next item, maybe his teeth. So we could probably use the same material, but maybe we give him slightly yellower teeth. Colour, Fill Object. So you can see there we're just going in and baking in all of these base colours, which will allow us to then paint upon. And we can edit the colour in here and edit the material, and these are baked in, so they will not change. Now if I go up here, we have a model which I've already set up, like so. So this has all the basic colours in. I'm just going to close that menu there. So now we can start painting, basically. Actually, this model doesn't have symmetry enabled, and I'm not going to wait all that time for the symmetry to reactivate. There we go. Let's go back to that object there. Let's go back to our base body. So there we go, we've got our symmetry still. So obviously, as you saw with that other object, I'd done the eyes and the tongue and everything else. But obviously it would take a while for it to calculate that symmetry again on a different model. So I'm just going to use this one for now. I was going to show you the other one, but this one will do. We're just going to focus on the body anyway, so that's not a problem. So yeah, now we can start to think about painting. So I'm going to change my stroke to the spray. Actually, what I'm going to do is I am going to go to that other one, like so, because I don't want symmetry at this early stage, because I'm going to be painting with such big strokes. I want variety on either side of the model. So change our stroke to spray, which it's on, and I'm going to change the colour to, we want a basic sort of pale but darker sort of skin tone to start off with. Just something like that. Change my channels up here just to RGB again, because we only want to paint the colour. And I'm going to drop the RGB intensity down to something like 10. So let's just give that a try. So at the moment it's not looking very blotchy, it's just painting sort of a large area. So let's undo that. And now I'm going to just activate an alpha. So let's just experiment with some of these. So maybe alpha 24. I'm going to drop the size as well. And as you can see, that's looking blotchier, which is exactly what we're after. So let's just make the brush a bit bigger. And all we're going to do is we just want to block it out a little. And because we're not painting with a solid colour, we're still getting the dark red showing through. And we're being quite loose with this. You know, we could increase the draw size if we wanted to speed things up. Because we're using that alpha as well, you know, we're getting even more subtle, just subtle marks on the surface of the skin, just to add a bit more variety. Let's zoom out. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all the other subtools, maybe apart from his eyes, just to speed things up a little bit so we can just focus on this. As you can see, it's just a case of just building up these colours gradually. So if I change this to a more defined stroke, we turned off the alpha and we started painting like that. The difference between that and that is this is a lot more blotchy. It's almost a lot more detailed in a way, whereas that's too defined. We don't want this. We just want loose strokes. You know, we could even switch the alphas around as we're working, you know, for a bit more variety. But for now, this is the base coat, remember. We don't want it completely covered, we still want some of that red showing through. Like so, just don't forget the face. Zoom in on there. Now maybe we want to make the brush a bit smaller because we want the eyes to have that tired, worn look. So we want that to be a bit redder around there. Tip of the nose possibly a bit redder as well. But again, we're not being precise at this stage, we're just generally blocking in. You know, we don't want any large areas which are just flat red. We just want to add in that sort of variety. Even the inside of his empty scalp. So there you go, get the general idea there. So this is just quick demo, so you could probably take a bit more time. So once you've got the first layer in, it's then time to sort of build on top of that. And if you're not very confident as you're working, you could always use the layers option here, and for each different colour just add in another layer and work on top of those and just build up your layers as you're working. I'm quite happy to just go in and experiment. So now we just add a bit more of a defined skin tone. Maybe work with a slightly smaller brush. And now we're just going to go in and paint our second layer. And at this stage you have to start thinking about real skin and sort of which parts of the body would naturally have this more deeper red showing through. You know, your palms are normally paler. Now we're just, again, just going over again. But if we look, we've still got that sort of mottled skin surface. Maybe the armpits are a little bit redder there. Come down to the legs. Because we're just taking the time to build this up a stage at a time, we are getting all that nice skin sort of variety in there. Maybe leave his buttocks to be a bit redder. The same with these sort of folds on his back. Maybe the recesses are a little bit redder. You know, we could do the same with his hump. But again, you know, this area is going to be covered by his clothing eventually, so like I say, I'm just doing this quickly, so obviously you'll take a bit more time over it, look a bit more into where the skin tones need to be. So again, we come to the face, maybe a smaller brush. We want more fleshy tones on the cheek, less around the eyes. Maybe just let his lips be a little redder as well. Obviously around the ears. We can come back to the ears later and just add in a bit more of a pink tone just to give the illusion of light passing through, of sort of the subsurface scattering. So again, it's still quite rough, but we're just building up these layers. And then when you get to a point where you're happy to move on, you just basically change your colour. You know, maybe a bit yellower. Perhaps we want to add in a bit of blue or green. We'll maybe add in a bit of that later. But in this case, we may just leave it near that colour and increase our intensity. You know, because we now want some really defined skin tones. And we'll perhaps change our alpha to something else. Let's have a look. Maybe something a bit more blotchy like this one. So that's maybe a bit too intense. Let's undo that. The key is we just want variety across the surface. We don't want large areas of flat, defined colour. Maybe that needs to be a little bit pinker. Go back to that other alpha, you know, and just don't be afraid to switch around and experiment with different colours and different alphas, just to maybe make that a bit darker. That's a little bit better. And what's great is we've still got this variety in the surface. So his skin already looks a lot more interesting than if we'd have just applied a basic flat colour. So I'll just add some around here. Now obviously I need to go in and spend a bit more time, add a bit more detail in. But once we're starting to get to this stage, we can play around with our alphas and we can start to think, well, let's start to experiment with some other colours. So maybe we could add a bit of blue in. Oop. And then let's switch back to that blotchy alpha 8. And just gradually, so if you look, just adding in that blue into the skin there, that just livens it up. It almost makes him look a bit cold, a bit worn out. The skin is maybe not the healthiest it's ever been. It's always worth experimenting with different colours. At the end of the day, you can always click undo. That's the beauty of these sorts of packages. It's not like if you were painting traditionally, then your colours would be baked in. You can always try something. If it doesn't work out, just undo it. I'm not going to go around to the back of him because I've not been working on the back, I've just been focusing on the front. So you're just blocking in these large areas of colour. So let's just maybe try a bit. Let's just go for let's try a purple so we can see if we can make his skin look a bit more bruised and it's these complicated layers of colour which just add a bit more life to your character. We want some on the end of his nose because that's going to be redder. Obviously his lips need to be a slightly different colour as well, so let's just zoom in. There. Maybe that's a bit too purpley. But we can always paint over it. It's not the end of the world. So let's say you've blocked in all your base colours like this. You're quite happy with how it's looking. We can now start going in and working in finer detail. So let's switch our alpha to, which one is it? This one, alpha 22, which looks like veins. I'm going to change the colour to red. And now I'm just going to, that's maybe a bit too bright. Maybe make that darker. And this is quite subtle. But what we'll get is sort of the illusion, you can just make it out there. We're getting the illusion of sort of that sort of aged, mottled sort of skin, when you get all the sort of, you can almost see like little tiny blood vessels and veins underneath the surface. See, we can just start making it out around there, and that's sort of a nice touch just to add in. Again, just using that quick alpha. We can see it more up here, and it's also helping to bring out the detail which was sculpted into the model. We can maybe add some of that. Oop. Something's happened with the purple we applied earlier. I'm not too concerned about that for now. We can always paint over that or adjust it. So there we've got pinker cheeks, got the blood vessels showing through. We can also go the other way and treat them as actual veins and maybe make this bigger. Go over like so. And there, we just saw that one pop up there. And again, it's just getting those subtle veins popping up under the skin. Maybe a bit too intense. Maybe make it a bit smaller. Just wait for it to save. I'll just pause while it does the auto saving. So that's done. I'm just going to undo that because again that's just a little bit too intense, so I might just turn down the RGB intensity. But again, it's very subtle, but we're getting all those veins appearing underneath the skin. You know, and that's starting to look quite nice around there. And I mean, we've been painting for what, 10-15 minutes, and already, I mean, the face is looking quite good. I mean, obviously you could spend a lot more time, you know, dedicated to adding in all those little details, painting in all those little intricacies, and, you know, adding a bit more detail into the lips. But there we've got that nice sort of bruised, damaged skin look that we're after for this character. And while we've got this alpha, we can also switch to the drag rect stroke and just add in some more quick defined veins, again just using this alpha. And obviously there are hundreds of other alphas floating around on the internet. These are just using the default ones. But there we've got that surface detail, we've got the variety in the colour tones, and it didn't take us long to do. And like I say, this is just a quick example, so you could spend a lot more time playing with that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to leave you to just continue working on your texture. And then in the next video, what we'll do is we will look at exporting all this information out of ZBrush and bringing it back into Maya.